Good evening and welcome to the August 9th, 2023 East Lansing Planning Commission meeting. Mr. Dempsey, would you please take roll?
Yes, good evening. Chairperson Sullivan.
Here.
Vice Chairperson Bowman.
Here.
Commissioner Boyd.
Here.
Commissioner Denault.
Here.
Commissioner Hendricks. Commissioner Lapine. Commissioner Wagner.
Here.
Commissioner Williams. We have 5 present. We do have a quorum.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
Motion to approve tonight's agenda.
And seconded.
Moved by Commissioner Denault.
Sure.
Well, yeah. Seconded by Wagner. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to offer an amendment to the motion. In light of the fact that it looks like we have a significant number of people to comment on the public hearing 6.1 this evening, I'd like to move that we move item 7.1 to just after verbal communications from citizens in order to expedite their presentation here.
Is there a,
I think you need a second. Yeah.
I think we need a second on that one, right? Is there a second?
Second that.
Seconded by Commissioner Boyd. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And the ayes have it. And then I believe we have another, can we have a motion to approve tonight's agenda? And that was an amendment, right? Yeah, see, you almost got me there. Motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Motion approved of agenda.
Moved by Commissioner Boyd, seconded by Vice Chair Bowman.
Nope, I think we already have that motion.
Yeah, my
It's already-
motion was already on the table.
Okay, so I guess we'll just consider that motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And the ayes have it. All right, on to item 1.3, approval of the minutes from the July 26, 2023 meeting. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes from July 26th.
Moved by Commissioner Boyd,
Second?
seconded by Vice Chair Bowman. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it, motion carries. That brings us to item number 2, committee reports. I don't believe we have any. Item number 3, staff reports. Mr. Dempsey?
Yes, good evening. Just one update, and that's pertaining to staffing. So we did extend an offer to an individual for the planning and zoning administrator role. So we are waiting to see if that will be accepted. We're hopefully optimistic that that will happen, and hopefully we'll have an update by the end of the week on where we stand with that. So fingers crossed. That's all I have.
So, yeah, all right, thank you. On to item number 4, commissioner announcements. Seeing none. Item number 5, communications from citizens. Item 5.1, written communications. There is a lot of written communications in our packet on both sides of the agenda item 6.1. And then we are on to number 5.2 on the agenda, verbal from the audience tonight. A couple things I will point out on the front end. We have a lot of people tonight. The city has a standing 5-minute limit for conversation for the commission. And please, if you're going to come up and speak, fill out a card so that we have your contact information and name for the minutes. And typically, communication is reserved for the discussion item that is on the agenda when that item comes up. But you can address this now if you wish, but the preference is for when the agenda item is up. Read these now, right? Read all these. Yeah, 500 black. 500 black. 500 black. Can we take these up when the agenda item? Sure. Yeah, I think we're gonna, so we have a lot of correspondence up here for cards of people that are wishing to speak. We're gonna take up these when we take up the agenda item tonight. Or if anyone wants to come up and address us now on anything not on the agenda. All right. Seeing none, is there anybody online on the queue? All right, that brings us to item 7.1 as we move the agenda. Consideration of a request from E&G Connection LLC for a modified site plan and special use permit approval for 115 Albert Avenue. Mr. Dempsey?
Yes, so as you recall from your last meeting, there was a public hearing on this proposal. This is the proposal to convert the existing Black Cat Bistro into Los Tres Grill. They are looking at a reduction in seating, changing outdoor seating by adding some additional seats along Albert Avenue, and then doing some facade work. I did want to clarify one point to be clear, and I may have been sort of guilty of giving the wrong notion, but the facade improvements that will occur along the side of the building that faces Albert will extend up into the storefront of that particular restaurant. So the facade improvements do stop at that point. There is an existing tenant that is on the other side of that restaurant, so on the east side, that facade will remain as is. I just wanted to make that clear. That's how it is presented in your packet and how it was presented last week, but just to be very clear on that. So other than that, the Planning Commission did not have any additional follow-up questions on it that we needed to provide, but if there are any, I'm happy to answer those. Otherwise, we have a suggested motion with the listed conditions included in your updated report.
Thank you, Mr. Dempsey. And just to clarify on that point, I know we discussed this at the last meeting, so none of the improvements or modifications are being made to the adjacent property. It's exclusively to that corner property there.
Exactly, exclusive to that retail space.
Got it. Thought so. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Dempsey? Any questions for the applicant? I'm not sure if they're here. All right. I believe a motion is in order.
Actually,
Oh, Vice Chair?
If I may, I'd like to just make one more comment. I cautioned the applicant last time about I can't remember what the term you used was, the muted Spanish theme. And again, I think it's attractive. I don't think that I was perhaps direct enough. I take no exception to what's being proposed, and I presume that, if the motion is to recommend approval to City Council, that I would stand behind that. I want to once again reiterate that I think that if you dialed back on some of the muted Spanish details, that it would be just as successful. And my primary concern is that and hopefully this isn't the case, but if by chance this undertaking isn't as successful as you'd like, I don't want to see us in 5-10 years with a building that's sort of locked in for, yeah, exactly, you see, for sort of tacos and burritos, right? So I think what you've done is attractive. I think it could easily lose the cupola and maybe some of the other muted Spanish jewelry in order to sort of make it a little bit more universal. So again, no objection. I think it's very attractive. Maybe before it goes to council, you can revisit that. Thanks. And thanks for your tolerance of my architectural judgment. Thanks.
So it's called a cupola. I learn something new every day. Yeah. All right. Is there a motion? Noting for the minutes that Commissioner Lapine arrived at 7:09.
Thank you.
Just waiting for that motion.
I appreciate that. I don't have it. Could somebody, I would be happy to read it if somebody could point me toward the correct page.
Yeah. So page 9 of 11,
Thank
top
you.
right corner on the staff report.
I don't have it. I read it earlier today and I didn't see it.
Waiting for Dan to make a motion to approve the Black Cat Bistro.
If you downloaded the entire
I-
AIR,
We're not
it's-
seeing the motion.
It's 10 of 20.
I read it earlier
It's
today.
page 10 of 29 at the bottom.
Okay.
The 10 of 29 is, the heading on the page is
Dan,
Planning
you want me to
Commission
read it?
recommendations.
You're going to make the motion, yeah.
I'm happy to make.
Thank
there-
you.
is there a second?
Sorry, Ed.
Oh,
Please, go ahead. and read.
I move to recommend approval of the modified site plan and special use permit for ENG Connection LLC for the existing restaurant located at 115 Albert Avenue.
Moved by Commissioner Wagner. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Boyd. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. And the motion carries. All right, that brings us on to agenda item 6.1, consideration of request from 530 Albert 2023 LLC for site plan and special use permit approval for 530 Albert Avenue. Mr. Dempsey?
Yes, thank you again. So I'm going to provide an overview of the project as we typically do, and then the applicant obviously is here and can speak to it as well. So let me share my screen so that I can share some of the visuals that we have. Just a little bigger. Okay, so the proposal before you this evening is a project at 530 Albert Avenue. It's highlighted up on the screen in red. So this is the 500 block that borders Albert to the north. You have Bailey to the east, Grand River to the south, and then Division to the west. The site is currently the Bailey Avenue parking lot that the city operates. The area highlighted in red where the proposal is being made is the portion of the lot that the city does not own. The city actually leases that portion of the lot to operate that entire lot. The remainder of the lot, the east side of it, that is the portion of the lot that the city does own. So that is under ownership of the city. But again, we operate it as one singular lot, 121 parking spaces, 85 in the red area, and the balance to the east. The proposal itself is for a 5-story mixed-use development, predominantly residential in nature, with Studio 1 and 2-bedroom units. I'll move down and provide you with a breakdown of the units here. So there's 50 units that would be studio, 62 1-bedrooms, and 10 2-bedrooms for the total 122 units. The units in terms of beds would be 132, and then the required parking for each is listed there. The studios require 0.75 parking spaces per unit, or 37.5, which we typically round up. 62 for the 1-bedroom and 15 for the 2-bedroom, so a total of 115 parking spaces. I'm going to jump down to the site itself. Bear with me a second. So this rendering, again, shows the layout of the building. You can see that it's sort of in an inverted U shape here, where you have the 5 stories that extend around an open air space that is off of the alleyway. And then you have the parking lot that still remains to the east. At this point, you know, it would be the city's intent to continue to operate that parking lot if this project were approved. The developer's also shown interest in potentially, though, using that for staging during the construction period. Moving to the floor plan layout, and to talk a little bit about that. So again, to the top of the screen would be the Albert Avenue sidewalk, and then the front of the building. The different color coding for the units, the green are the studio units, the light yellow would be the 1-bedroom, and then the light blue would be the 2-bedroom units. The area sort of in salmon colored would be other uses. The main residential management office would be at the center of that first floor. There'd be a maintenance room off to the east side. Further east along the walkway that would be between the building's east facade and the city's parking lot. That would be commercial space, about 1,100 square feet. And then there'd be a community room just south of that. They would have sort of an outdoor activity plaza space here with planters, sort of in a somewhat similar fashion to what exists there today, to create a sense of sort of pedestrian friendliness and open space as well for the residential project. Looking at typical floor plans for floors 2 through 4, again, this would be 100% residential on the floors above the first floor, so you can see, again, the mix that is predominantly the studios and 1 bedroom with a couple 2-bedroom units. So that would be floors 2, 3, 4. And then on the 5th floor, the difference, if you sort of flip here, you can see those 1-bedroom units. There'd be a couple more studios, and then you'd have an additional 2-bedroom unit on that upper 5th floor. This is the sort of west elevations and east elevations of the property. You can see the floors here, about 59 feet plus 6 inches for the upper floor elevation in terms of overall height of this building. And then you have the north elevation, so that would be the elevation at the top here that would be facing Albert Avenue with the main entrance there. And then you have the south elevation, again, that would be the alleyway. And you can see, they depicted, for instance, here, some umbrella tables that would be in the outdoor activity space as it's labeled on the one site plan. I'm going to jump back to the actual site plan just to talk a little bit more about sort of some of the site issues here. Zoom in. So as I mentioned before, the parking lot that is in place now, the portion that's owned by the city would continue to be here. One of the things that has to be determined and worked out is how that would be finished along here. Again, if it were to be approved, the expectation would be there'd be a finished curb there, and essentially be the end of the parking lot. There is a sidewalk here that is proposed to be continuous through here that would go out to the Albert sidewalk. One of the things that we talked about with is sort of this whole design of the Albert streetscape and what that looks like. There is a very specific plan in the city's downtown design guidelines, but that plan is based upon a parking lot being in place. So we have to really revisit that and to see what makes sense there, because obviously you would want continuity with the sidewalk face, and there was discussion about, should you be consistent with what happens to the west in terms of moving that sidewalk out to the curb and then allowing for green space, which is kind of that white area between other walkways that would be closer to the building and on private property. That dark black line here at the top would be, of course, the property line as that follows down to the south and around back to the west and to the north. Again, this would be the sort of outdoor area in the back. We noted in the staff report, we'd like to see more details about a number of things. That would be, of course, this sidewalk, its interconnection to the sidewalk to the east and sort of what the plan is there. We'd like to see more detail in terms of how the trash and other back of house issues are going to be addressed. As we all know, that can be a real challenge in our residential downtown properties to balance any sort of nearby commercial uses and the residential uses in terms of trash and access and deliveries and moving and all of that. So a number of questions that exist there as well. The plan would be, of course, to maintain the alleyway sort of as it stands today, and any disruption in the alleyway in terms of physical infrastructure would have to be addressed as part of the project, should there be any needs with respect to utilities and otherwise. They did provide a preliminary landscape plan, as well for the project. There we go. Again, this is one that I think is still open to a fair amount of discussion yet in terms of the tree placement, the green space placement, how the streetscape sidewalk interface would really work, what that would look like, and also in terms of the street itself. There's been some discussion. The street is reasonably wide there. There is a number of parking spaces on the north side of the street. There are a couple parking spaces now on the south side near the MSU, FCU, Credit Union, ATM, which obviously would go away in this instance. So thinking about that, and is there potential to add additional parking along that portion of the street as well? They do propose, obviously, a number of street trees along there, a number of plantings and trees along the alleyway as well, to obviously soften the hardscape and make an improvement there. But again, that's something that staff needs to sort of continue to evaluate. We don't have a landscape architect on staff right now, so we're actually looking to an outside source to help provide some additional guidance there as well. Other than that, a number of the departments that look at preliminary plans are currently doing the review. The Department of Public Works is looking at that and analyzing a number of the infrastructure-related issues around the site in conjunction with us. So we hope to have more feedback for you at your next meeting from that department, as well as any others in terms of police, fire. We look at this from as much as we can. It's very preliminary, obviously, the site plan, but from a building construction standpoint, understanding that as well. Obviously, we have to have a construction containment plan here, too. I do want to go back and revisit the parking issue, because I know that is obviously of high concern, and we're going to hear a lot of comments this evening regarding parking. In order to have a project of this size, obviously, without any of its own dedicated parking, it would need to rely entirely on the city's parking system. So the parking division provided us with the latest data that they had available in terms of permits as far as nearby structures. So the table here outlines what those are. So right now, the Bailey Garage, which is the small garage to the east of this across Bailey Street, for permits, that is sold out. They do have daily parking in there that's available as people come and go, but it is sold out for permits. The Division Garage has 218 available permit spaces, 20 in the lower level, 198 in the upper level. The differentiator there, as most of you may recall, is that the lower level parking is typically more expensive. It has a premium, obviously, because it doesn't require as much up and around. The Charles Garage, 211 spaces, 29 in the lower level and 182 in the upper level. So the total spaces between the two garages would be 429. So from that standpoint, certainly from our perspective for leasing spaces, the 115 that need to be leased, that would be an accurate, enough supply in terms of what's available currently. So did want to highlight that. The one thing that we noted in the report too related to parking and just traffic is that because they're not proposing any of their own parking on site, we have a provision in the code that doesn't require a traffic impact study if that's the case in the B3 district. However, in past projects, despite that, there has been a request at times from the Planning Commission and others that they still complete such an analysis or a study. And we've had conversations with the developer about that potential. I think one of the things that we talked about is that doing a study like that before the students return, and we're sort of, when we're not at maximum sort of community occupancy, is problematic. So that's just something to keep in mind as we potentially look at an analysis with that as well. This is a sort of a unique situation, not unlike the Center City project where you had a surface lot that you're removing, so you're sort of having to displace parkers that have to go elsewhere into the system. And then you're also sort of, in that case, it was different because you were also adding substantial parking. Here, this is more equivalent to like when we did the residences project, right? When that was built, they didn't provide any parking. They utilized the Grove. The St. Anne project east of that was similar. So a little bit different because you're not necessarily displacing parking. So this is a hybrid, right? Where we're both displacing parking and we're not providing it on site. So it is a little bit unique because in the residences in St. Anne, they didn't have any on-site parking prior as well. So that's an issue to be looked at. With that, I think I'll stop at that point. I think I covered the key issues. I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions. Just a reminder, obviously, for our audience that this is your initial public hearing So we'll have lots of questions that we'll take back, and we'll be updating the staff report as we get additional information, and you consider this at your next meeting.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the commission? I will defer to you all first. Commissioner Wagner?
Tim, I've got a question for you. So,
Sure.
I know that there's not going to be, well, there might be a traffic study done, but has the city ever done a study like, well, like an economic impact study? So we're taking away parking spaces from businesses. I'm just wondering, it seems that there's a lot of the opposition is, it'll be harder to access the businesses because of a removed parking structure. So, I mean, I understand that, but I just was wondering if there's a way to quantify that, or if we can figure out what the impact of losing that parking area for the businesses around it would be.
Yeah. The first part of that question, have we ever done that? The city, of course, has done the city hasn't. Developers have done traffic impact studies that the city has had a third-party reviewer look at and be part of the record for various projects. So we have done that. However, that really looks at available parking and traffic impacts on the street. They typically have not gone as far as sort of looking at trying to estimate what the potential impact might be on adjoining, business. So like a market analysis study that a retail site location firm or someone might do. We typically haven't done that. We have had some developers, we have done economic impact studies, but that's the broader sort of economic impact in terms of what does a development do, job and creation, overall investment in infrastructure, but not the nuanced sort of analysis that you mentioned.
Commissioner Alpine?
Another question for you, Tim, that's kind of along the lines of Commissioner Wagner is, I know maybe a month or maybe longer than that ago, the city sent out a survey asking community members for feedback on both the parking situation in downtown East Lansing and asking for some feedback about what brings people to downtown. And one of the things I'm most excited about tonight is being able to hear directly from our community members about their perceptions about this. But I'm curious, kind of as another data source, are the findings of that survey something that could be shared broadly with the Planning Commission in some of the coming meetings when we'll further discuss this, so we can get an idea of not necessarily the students, but our community members that live here year-round, what their perspectives might be?
Yes, to all elements of that question. So the parking master plan that was recently completed had a survey as part of it to assess those perceptions of parking. The response rate was okay. It wasn't maybe as high as we'd like to see, but I think there is some valuable information in there. I believe our parking master plan, the update is now, I think it's online. I think the parking division has published it officially, so it is available. But absolutely, we can provide that information to the Planning Commission, and it is out there. And there is some good, I think, helpful information, particularly in terms of those survey questions, but also just analyzing the system and sort of looking at capacity as a whole. One of the issues I think that we struggle with all the time is, of course, the availability of parking and the perception of the availability of parking. At our peak hours, okay, I'm going to accept game days here, right? So we're putting game day Saturdays aside, the 6 or 7 a year now. Outside of that, we're at about 65% peak occupancy system-wide. So we have about 1,000 parking spaces available even at our peak hour, which is like 12:30 during earlier day in the week. And so I think from that standpoint, we've got lots of assets. It's how do we get people to utilize those and realize that they're in structures largely, and that, so some of the things the master plan talks about, and I'll stop here because we could talk a long time about that master plan, is how do we start to adjust rates to incentivize people to use the garages, so lower rates there and actually increasing on-street rates to sort of a demand pricing model. So, but yes, that information's there, and we'll definitely share it with you.
Thank you.
While others are pondering questions, I'll ask a quick one. I was trying to find a little bit about the history of this lot here. So it's privately owned. How long has it been used as a parking lot? Do you know?
That's a great question, and probably some of the audience members would know better than I, but, you know, I've been
If
here
they do,
since
please come forward with it,
2004, so it's been, 20, 30 plus probably. I know that a portion of it, the east side, there were a couple fraternities and sororities there that the city did acquire to expand that lot in conjunction to the development across the street, the condominium project. But yeah, the core lot has been in place for a pretty lengthy period of time. And we can get the exact date.
And if I recall correctly, didn't the city just renew an agreement with them? And when does that end? And how would that process
Yeah.
work if they decided not to renew?
Yeah, currently, we're essentially on an agreement that was extended another year that was extended from this August to next. But essentially, there is a provision where they can terminate that agreement. And that would potentially happen, of course, again, if this project were to be approved, they could terminate that agreement with us, and then it would no longer obviously be enforceable.
One more. And it's currently zoned as B3, correct? So
That
what
is-
allowable uses would they have there, zone B3? I was looking for that information in the
Yeah,
report.
so under the B3 district, of course, you can have a variety of retail uses, restaurants like we have elsewhere in the downtown. You can do multifamily residential. You can also do office space as well. Those are sort of predominant. There are some other recreational and entertainment type uses that are allowed too. In the B3 district, there's also the provision, and we talk about this in terms of the housing mix, that typically a multifamily housing project, 25% of it, the diverse housing provision that was added a number of years ago, back in 2017, when that provision was added, it said that 25% of housing units had to be, owner-occupied, 55-plus housing, or affordable housing, or anything that was similarly sort of a diverse nature. This project is being proposed as 100% affordable housing, so it obviously exceeds the 25%. In fact, it exceeds it to the point where they could use the balance of the units, I think it's 90, as a credit that another developer could potentially use for another residential project. There is that provision in the code to do that. So it's sort of a unique element that was added, and we haven't seen that play out here. But it will potentially impact the next residential project, but it's also the developer's sort of property right, so to speak, if they were to get this approval, because they have the exclusive right to sort of work out a credit with that next developer.
Thank you. Vice Chair?
Yeah, actually, following up on that, the permitted uses in that zone include the multiple family dwelling units as long as they're associated with a principal use, and I think that the applicant has made a passing attempt at providing a commercial space that would sort of presumably satisfy that requirement. But then I read a little further and I see the unique housing opportunities, at least according to this would be City Council's determination. Is it your assertion that the worker housing is actually is indeed that unique housing opportunity that's not otherwise available in the city, so it would satisfy that particular condition?
Yeah, based on our information to date, that is correct. The developer is pursuing Michigan State Housing Development Authority tax credits, right? Those are federal credits that are allocated by the states. If there was a tax credit program, it would be required to be affordable. I'm sure the developer will speak more specifically to that. But because of that, it would qualify as that diverse housing. Now, in terms of, you point out an important nuance is that residential use has to be in conjunction with another primary use. So typically, though, that would be requiring commercial use, potentially on the majority or significant portion of the first floor. But there's also a provision in the code that when you have the diverse housing, the council can waive that and actually do 100% residential, although the developer has offered up a portion of it being commercial. So that is another sort of issue that I expect we'll see a lot of commentary on as well.
Can I follow up on that too? So I'm going to ask you to speculate a little bit because there's an additional condition that might provide for, accommodating the request. And again, this is number 2, and I know you're familiar with it, but I'm going to ask you to give me some example. If you've got, provides a transition from mixed-use development to lower density residential development or residential use, which this certainly does, it seems to me, where a unique characteristic is present on the edge of the district. do you have any thoughts about what that might, and again, I'm sort of calling you up on the spot here. For the life of me, I couldn't think of what that might be.
Yeah, in my mind, that would be a use that might be atypical. So if there was, let's say there was a National Register of Historic Places, facility, a church or something unique that architecturally, right, where you'd want to have a appropriate transition versus maybe a more nondescript commercial building. So something like that
Yeah.
could potentially,
Okay.
but that's,
I'm just curious.
yeah, that's
Because-
about as off the top of my head.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Can I get us one more?
Please.
I also noted in your staff report, you kindly pointed out the places where the proposal fell a little bit short, and I'm talking specifically about the electronic vehicle charging stations. I personally would very much like to see those somehow accommodated, despite the fact that any accommodation of that would have to happen off-site from where the sort of off the applicant's property. Do we have a provision in the code that might provide for, say, in the whatever the remaining lots are, or something in an existing garage or something like that?
Yeah, because that parking would be off-site, I
Right.
think the linkage of it off-site could work as well. So we'd have to look at additional potential EV spaces within either the division and/or Charles garages to sort of meet that standard. And related to that was the bicycle parking, so getting some clarity around
Sure.
the bike parking is important as well.
I got one more, if I may. Yeah. This is just by way of clarification. There seemed to be a discrepancy regarding the start of construction and the end of construction. I think that the applicant has indicated that it's the late 2023 this year, and then 18 to 24 months, so it would end in sometime in 2025. I'm looking to you, and
Well,
you're sort of contradictory. I'm presuming it was just a typo, but just.
Well, I think when the application was initially submitted a while back, the timeline might have been, based on a schedule that isn't what we're on now. We're on a more delayed schedule, because again, it depends on how long it takes the planning commission, how long it will take to council, additional, analyses if we have to go to the transportation commission. The applicant, of course, is subject to the percent for art as noted in the staff report, so they'll have to go to the arts commission. So timeline is somewhat up, but I think the 18 to 24 from whatever start date would be a reasonable estimate, but I'll again let the developer speak to that.
Thank you. That's all. Thanks.
Commissioner Wagner?
Can I just ask a couple of questions? So I'm trying to get my head around this whole thing. So I understand that we like diverse housing. I was looking today. I was a little bit surprised by the prices for a studio and a 1 and 2 bedroom that were listed. So I just looked online and I found a bunch of places downtown that were cheaper than what the applicant has suggested for initial rents. How is it decided? What is the income cutoff for qualifying applicants if this house were to go forward? And I know it's a perfect place for students, right? So can students, let's say a student votes their freshman year, establishes residency, the following year or whatever, I know they have to live on campus for 2 years, but could they qualify as low income because their students are not making any money and live in this apartment or this building? How do you stop students from doing that?
Sure, all great questions. The developer can talk about the price points and how they relate back to cost of construction and then what the income ranges are. The income ranges are going to be mandated through the MISTA tax credit financing. So they're going to have to hit certain, limits on what somebody can be earning or a household can be earning to be able to get into the project. Now, under the tax credit program and the restrictions, the affordability period, which is fairly lengthy, there are restrictions that students are not allowed. And then again, the developer will speak to that more specifically in terms of those requirements and the restrictions that are placed on them and how they would go about enforcing that requirement.
I had a follow-up question to that, actually. I was looking through the report, and I saw that the rates that are outlined for the apartments are initial rent rates. I'm assuming there's a process that they can go through to increase those. Do you know if that's through MISTA or is that through the city?
Yeah, there is no, it isn't. The city would have nothing to do with those rental rates once they're either being established or increasing, but that would be, part of their requirements under the MISTA financing. So And again, the developer can speak to that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Commissioner Denault?
Tim, you know, I'm a relatively new resident to East Lansing, so if this exists, please, you know, let me know. But has the city done any sort of housing study to better understand what types of housing people who live in East Lansing or want to relocate to East Lansing are searching for? Like, do we know that this type of housing is something that they're interested in, or are they more looking for those single-family homes?
Yeah. So the city so when I was gone the last 4 years from the city did do some housing study work. So there is a study, and that's another thing that we can sort of provide some background on. And that spoke to types of housing that are necessary. The term that comes up a lot is the missing middle, sort of that segment of apartments and units that you try to find for people who necessarily can't afford a high-end sort of downtown environment apartment, or might be priced out of the market because of the way that student housing sort of can really throw the market into a much different dynamic than you might find in Lansing, for instance. But we do have that study to help analyze that. The developer in Mishta, you know, they do a market study. They have to do that as part of the financing. So that is a requirement of their process. And again, I'm sure they'll be speaking to that as well.
Thank you.
Just to follow up to that too, I recently read the housing study when we had the Grove Street application, and this is kind of essentially what the report suggested was kind of one of the more needed housing types. And I think in particular because there's studios and one-bedroom apartments, and which is a little atypical and due to the abundance of student housing. I did have a couple other questions, unless anybody else does.
I just have one quick
Commissioner
one.
Lupine?
Just humor me on this, Tim. Don't try not to laugh. In the table on page 24 of our packet, where it describes the parking required per unit, studio has 0.75 units. Does that mean not a full car for one studio?
Yeah.
Is that what that means?
Yeah, that's correct. So
Okay.
And it's
Okay.
it's
I
a
feel
great
better.
it's a great question, and
Okay.
definitely
Not to laugh.
I
You're a
wouldn't.
small car.
Yeah, I would definitely wouldn't laugh at that. So my dad was a teacher, so he taught me not to do that. No, it's a great question, and the reason being is that studios obviously are often occupied by one person, right? But also the recognition that sometimes the one occupant may not have a vehicle, right? That you might have, if you have a development with 10 studio apartments, if you have 8 individuals who drive a car and 2 that don't, right? You don't necessarily need the 10 vehicles, you need the 8. And that sort of thinking went into that process, is that, you know, in an apartment setting, particularly, you know, like in a downtown environment where you're close to public transportation, you're in a walkable environment, you potentially have tenants that won't need a vehicle. So that's sort of the origin of that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Commissioner Wagner, was your hand up? No. Vice Chair?
No, sorry.
Oh, everybody keeps putting their hand up, and I'll wait. It's like this middle raise of the hand. Yeah, so I had a question about the city's fiscal impact. So I'm trying to get my head around, so the thought that we're leasing the western 2/3 of this parking lot, paying a fee. We have underutilized parking in the ramp that's a block away. How do those numbers stack up? What would be the fiscal impact overall to the city?
Yeah. You know, so the fiscal impact, first starting with tax revenue, so the developer, because it's a Mishta financed project, is requesting a payment in lieu of taxes. So as we've done with other affordable housing projects in the city, the most recent one is the proposed PK housing development along Valley Court and Evergreen. They receive what's called that pilot, and that is 4% of shelter rent. So it's a significant reduction in property taxes, because what they're trying to do is ultimately reduce the rent burden. And one of the ways you do that is by reducing the expenses of the landlord, right? So that will be, you know, a factor. In terms of parking, certainly they would need to enter into a lease with the city to meet the parking requirement. The developers requested that they receive a rate that is, below market, again, because they have tenants who would be in affordable housing and trying to limit, housing burden. So that percentage hasn't been determined, what that might be, but it would be obviously new revenue, regardless of the rate, if those spaces aren't currently being occupied, right? So that is a potential economic impact. The other thing that would be an impact, of course, that wasn't until a few years ago is income tax. So anytime you bring residential users in here, again, affordable housing, we're not talking about people that are making, a lot of money necessarily, but some may still be subject, some might be, potentially exempt, depending on their income levels, right? That one, sort of a challenge to predict, but is a potential impact. And then sort of back to that economic impact statement, like any residential, what's the impact of having a resident in a downtown in terms of their spending potential, so.
And then one last follow-up to that. Who would be responsible for picking up the tab for the eastern third of the parking lot if that were going to be converted to a smaller parking lot? Would that be the developer?
Yeah, the
project
developer
of the
would be
city?
responsible for any of those improvements. So in terms of any curb and gutter that's going to need to go in, they'll be responsible to make sure that that's done.
They'll be responsible for it even though that they don't own that particular
Yeah, because
lot.
it's I think from our standpoint, it's something that we would, and we've already had that conversation in terms of, again, you're having to sort of cut that parking lot off at the property line. That sort of leaves an impact in terms of what we can do and to safely provide parking. Having curb and gutter in the lot is pretty critical. So.
Thank you. Any last questions for Mr. Dempsey? Mr. Boyd?
Maybe it'd be for the applicant, but for the parking spaces, was that included in the price of the rent, or was that going to be additional?
I have that question too.
Yeah, that, the developer can answer that, but it was our understanding in conversations that the individual tenants their preference is to have individual tenants lease that. So the rent cost wouldn't necessarily be included, but I believe, and again, the developer can clarify this if I speak incorrectly, the total sort of cost to the tenant is a factor in tax credit application. So they do consider how much those leases would cost the tenant. So they are factored into the analysis of the financing, even though they're not bundled with the rent rate.
So the city would lease the spaces to the developer and then lease them to the person that lives there.
That's one possible route, or the tenants would lease them directly from the city. That hasn't been finalized. But either way, the tenant, right, they're only going to pay that if, right, they have a vehicle, and whether it's direct to us and outside of the lease rate, if the developer's paying for it, they'd have to answer how they would structure that payment.
Mr. Boyd?
We talked a little bit about the, the initial rental rates, but in 2025, when this is built, are they going to be that would be subject to change, or will they hold true with the rates right here?
Yeah, I think that's a great question for the developer. Yep, I can't answer that.
Thank you. Any last questions? Going once? All right, we're ready for the applicant. If you would like to approach the commission at the podium. Do we have their names? Oh, Christine. Got it.
The guy that's still sitting down there.
Okay.
That's Chris.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Evening.
My name is Chris Young. I am Vice President of Development for American Community Developers. Our company is the top affordable housing developer in the state of Michigan, city of Detroit. We're a top 50 in the United States. We're currently ranked 27th. We have approximately over 100 communities in 15 states. approximately 14,000 units. We provide homes, affordable homes for over 50,000 people in the United States currently. I have not, questions, or you want me to talk about the project, or how would you?
If you want to give an
Oh.
overview of the project.
Oh, okay.
anything
So
that you ask.
the project, just put it here. Project is a 5-story, 122 unit, all affordable development. It's for people who earn between 40 and 80% AMI, area median income, has to average 60. That's a requirement of the LIHTC program in MISTA. A lot of the requirements and questions that you asked, by the way, are all promulgated through Congress, and which is done through HUD, and HUD disperses everything to the housing finance that all the different states set up. MISTA is the one here for the state of Michigan, and so a lot of those rules come through MISTA. The project financing is approximately about $35.2 million. The MISTA LIHTC tax credits are approximately $14 million of that. Additional funding, which came through the state of Michigan through what's called ARPA. And in March, with the legislature and the governor, they approved $150 million more to support new and rehabbed affordable housing in the state of Michigan. This is one of the projects that has been approved. They have put in an additional $7.2 million for this project into the equity side. Long-term debt's about $8 million. Our investment, American Community Developers, is investing over $5 million in this development. We will not see any return on that money for the most part for at least 10 years, and not any return on the principal for over 35 years. It's an investment we're making into the community. It's what we do. We think long-term, generational, in fact. I won't be alive probably in 35 years, so and that's the affordability of the project, but that's what our commitment is to that. We're very, very long-term thinking as part of our company. Lot size about 0.69 acres. The other one's about a third of an acre, which is city-owned for about an acre total. But what we're using, and I should, really kind of stress that we're not taking away the parking on the private one. The people who own the lot, the sellers, have made a decision already to terminate the lease and go ahead and move in a different direction. That's not us doing that. But they did come to us. They had multiple offers on the property and several $1 million, by the way. And they came to us. We talked to them. We probably came a little late to the game, and talked to us in February. And we gave them the story of affordable housing. Affordable housing, obviously, in the United States is a key need. In the state of Michigan it is, and in the city of East Lansing. Affordable housing, as you know, has been on the council, the planning commission's agenda here for years. There have not been a lot of success in the downtown area in bringing that to fruition. We have brought forth a project that is completely financed. Our company is putting money investment into the project and also guaranteeing it, by the way, and we're willing to do that. So I get back, we're not, I don't think, and by the way, the people in East Lansing, even if they're in opposition to us, everybody I talk to, when I meet everybody, they're nice people, okay? I've been treated more fairly here than anywhere in the United States, and I go to a lot of places. So they're really nice people. I went to school here, my wife went to school here, we have a history here, and we do want to work with everybody. There are some questions that you had brought up. If there's any particular maybe about the project, I'd answer them now, but I do want to maybe answer some of the questions that you asked about, especially rent limits, by the way. So HUD yearly in April, it's supposed to be by April 1st, but typically the HUD secretary, Marcia Fudge, who's currently the secretary of HUD, has to buy off on those, and they're released on about May 1st this year. So every year the new rent limits come out. So the rent rates you see are the limits that we can charge people. Not what they'll be charged, it's the limits, and it depends on family size, by the way. Nobody can be charged more than 30% of their gross income, okay? But you do have to have a job to live in the community because the government doesn't pay the rent, the tenant does. So those rent limits are calculated that you see between 40% AMI and 80% AMI to average 60. The LIHTC program was promulgated by Congress back in 1986 under Reagan and the Democratic Congress with Tip O'Neill as the speaker. That brought forth this program that all affordable housing that you see today in the United States is really based on. So and HUD runs that program. So the rent rates, we don't determine the rent rates. HUD does. And those are the max rates that we can charge. So the question about 2025, there will be new rates at those times, by the way, that will come into play. But again, they have to be no more than 30% of the people's gross income who live in the community. And we're affordable housing people. It's in our DNA. 90+% of our business is affordable housing. We're a very large developer in the state of Michigan. We have several $100 million in the state of Michigan under development in affordable housing right now. So back to the rent limits, that's hopefully answers that question, if there's anything on it. We don't really set it, and it's really based on a formula that's promulgated that no more than 30% of anybody's gross income should be used for rent. By the way, what is rent? Rent is rent, all utilities, et cetera. So in that includes electrical, gas, water, sewer, storm, et cetera.
Compliance period, what's the duration?
The compliance period, if the question is asked, the federal requirement period is 15 years. Michigan tax on another 15 years, and then there's, that you go, typically a compliance period on a project in the state of Michigan is 35 years. So that's the minimum compliance period that the development will be under the affordable limits of affordable housing. I will tell you, our company is Affordable Housing Development Company, and owner, operator. We don't change project from affordability to market. That has not in our DNA. We don't typically sell projects. We buy stuff, rehab them, or we build them new organically and create more affordable housing.
Want to jump on the market study and students?
Mr. Young?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm not interrupting.
Commissioner.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the information about the percentages and asking you to do math in your head. Do you have a rough, because sometimes it's helpful to know what the actual income limits are as opposed to the percentages of average AMI? At least it does for me. Thanks.
1% income at 60% AMI. I'm using my HUD cheat sheet.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. And by the way, you'll be surprised how this ranges from California to Washington, D.C., okay, the different rates, okay. And I should step back one more thing, Commissioner. We do go to places that HUD tells us to go, by the way. And maybe you don't know this, but HUD has told us to come to East Lansing. East Lansing is in what's called the qualified census tract. It's called the 130 zone. So what happens is the developers are encouraged to go to places like this because they're given 130% more of the tax credits for equity. So the city of East Lansing is in that qualified census tract. There's two different types of that thing. It's called the DDA, difficult development area, or qualified census tract. And you're in a QCT. So anyway, 6% AMI for one person. They're allowed to earn $39,360. I can give you the income range, and for, but typically it goes, so you know, between under 40% to 80% is about $30,000 to $80,000. That's the income range. Is that better?
Yep. Again, it's
And
just
I
sort
will
of-
tell you that you'll be shocked. I have some places in the country, the income range can go over $100,000, and they're considered to be, because of such high cost of living in certain areas. But that's what's here in East Lansing.
Thank you. Yeah.
Address students and market study.
Okay, so one thing we do here too is the project outside of the parking question has been considered a low risk by MSHDA, by the way. They've already looked at the project and said, this is a low risk project for us. It's a project that's needed, and there's several market studies that are done by third-party consultants that are recognized and approved by MSHDA and by HUD to do that. And those people have opined on this project in East Lansing, and they consider it to be an appropriate project. In fact, a project that shows a great need for people in that AMI range. I mean, there's no question about that. And I think the question about students came up. So Michigan takes a very conservative view. The federal government has provided guidelines for that through HUD. Michigan takes a very conservative view. Students are not allowed. And we have to, same thing as income qualifying people, we have to verify that they're not a student. And what is a student? It's anybody that's been in college for 5 of the past 12 months. Now, there is some exceptions. Let's say that you income qualify, one of you, and you would live in the development, and you have a son or daughter that happens to be going to Michigan State University, you would be allowed to live in there, and so would your son or daughter, because you are the qualifying tenant. However, that doesn't mean that someone can come in and then bring in 4 other college students, or it's just, we have very strict requirements, okay, to qualify to live in a affordable housing development. There are strict penalties by both HUD and MISTA if you do not follow those.
Can I, Chris, Mr. Young, just sort of just following up on that. So what I'm hearing is that you're saying is that somebody's got to be really relatively well employed, because there's a bottom, there's a lower limit and an upper limit. So somebody say that working as a waiter or waitress 6 hours a week while they're a full-time student probably wouldn't hit the
It
lower
would not.
threshold?
It would not.
All right, I'm
They
just
would
making
not
up
qualify.
numbers, but-
Since they're a student, they do not qualify.
Okay.
Doesn't matter the income on that. And by the way, there's a great need for affordable housing across the spectrum here. So 0 to 30% AMI, which is typically called Section 8, by the way, but there's a great need for that. There's a great need between 40 and 80%. And then you talk about the missing middle, which typically is 80 to 140%. There is a great need across those whole spectrums. It's really hard to afford a house to be able to buy one and then pay the taxes and upkeep on it. A person in the 40 to 80% AMI range here could never afford a house in downtown East Lansing. And so that's how the LIHTC program is typically, it is set up, and typically it is a rental model.
Commissioner Denault?
Yeah, could I just ask a follow-up question about graduate students? You say that students at all are not allowed to be residents in this development. Does that include graduate students who are essentially just professionals who happen to be in school at the same time? I ask because I was recently a PhD student and found it very hard to find affordable housing. Then again, I was living in Chicago. But, right, I'm sure that PhD students and other graduate students feel a similar crunch in that we are not adequately compensated oftentimes for our labor.
If you are a student postgraduate of high school, okay, so if it's college or postgraduate or doctorate, you are not allowed. Now, there are some exceptions, as I said, and there's some unique exceptions, as that if you can, that Congress has provided that if you are a student that is pregnant, guess what? You do have some allowable rights to live in affordable housing. There's just very unique situations that we have, but almost 99%, any student outside of high school cannot live in a LIHTC program because that is promulgated by Congress. It is not meant to be student housing. It is meant to help the workforce out.
Vice Chair?
Another hypothetical.
No,
So
fine.
somebody that's working full-time and going to school part-time, there's the student in the last, what did you say, 5 of the last 12 months, but they're primarily they're a worker, they're going to school at night.
It is not us, okay? It is MISTA that takes a very conservative view of that, okay? And so we have to follow those rules. But there are some exceptions for trade schools and things like that that are allowable, and that because of their income level, their income qualified to be able to live in a development like this as they work. And, you know, as I said, by the way, people don't typically live in affordable housing their whole life. Remember, it's typically for someone, especially because it's workforce, it's typically someone more younger than older. We hope eventually they earn their way out of, they don't qualify anymore. And they've saved up enough money because they've saved some rent money that they would normally have paid on the market, that they maybe buy a house then. I mean, that's what affordable housing is meant. It's meant to be not to cost burden people for housing.
I guess I just have a procedural question, because this is all very helpful information, and we will see this again. And in the sake of time, I'm wondering if it might make sense to start hearing from the folks that we have in the crowd today, knowing that we will see this again.
Yes. I have some more questions.
Okay.
And then we can get to it. I don't know, but I get the point. I think we should wrap up our questions and then move on to the public hearing component. So my first one is, I just want to go back to the first thing you said about the current owners of it using it as a parking lot. So they don't intend, once the lease expires, to use this as a parking lot. That's your understanding, like, regardless of what happens with this proposal.
That is correct. I mean, we actually agreed to them to let them keep the lease going with the city after August 31st. We said, that, okay, we'll agree to that. That's not typically what should have happened. It should have just been terminated as it's the agreement between the city, but, I mean, we're not here as an absolute developer. We are trying to work and everything on that. But yes, it is our understanding, and it's not our understanding, it is a fact, okay, that the parking lot is going away.
Could you detail the commercial use space? Is there any?
No, we met with
intent
some
for that?
people, by the way, both probably in this room and some other people, and part of that was talking about flex space. And so we created at least 1,000 square feet plus some other space that could be used for commercial public use. And some of the people talked to us, well, could it be an incubator space to help develop businesses and stuff like that? Yes, it could be, okay? So there's not a defined use for that space yet. It's not something that we've put out and say, okay, it's triple net rent or something like that. We may actually work with the city on something like an incubator lab or something like that. That has been brought to our attention. And that's why we took away one of the units, by the way, and created that commercial space, actually 2 units.
And for the life of me, I can't figure out where ride sharing and delivery would take place on this site.
You know, that's something we're working with the city with. We talked about that Albert, quote unquote, is approximately 4 lanes, okay, currently, okay? So you have 2 in the middle and you got 1 on each side. On the south side, obviously, there's not parking there anymore for the most part, except for a couple of spots. I think we talked about as we developed this, that may be a proper location for pickup and drop off, et cetera. We're working with the city to make sure that is appropriate. We do not want to do that in the alley. The alley is meant to be kept clear and for deliveries for the businesses, et cetera, et cetera.
All right, and then last question. So the public space for the building, the pavilion or whatever you have, the outdoor patio, is that purely for the tenants of the building or is it for the public? And could you speak a little bit about why you located it where you did? It seems like it's kind of locked into the building there. Why didn't you put it on a corner or the east side?
Well, you know, working with several different, I'll call them stakeholders, not to make them personal, okay? But we talked to a lot of people and we wanted to activate the alley. We wanted to keep the alley open, and that was the best way to do that was create this C-shape where the alley could be kept open, seating kept arranged there, et cetera, and maybe have some steps that tier it from the actual level where you walk through the alley to create some public and private spaces, but keep the benches, et cetera. Obviously, there's liabilities to people coming into the actual private space and being hurt and stuff like that, okay? Et cetera, but you know, it was meant to keep it open, meant to have tables, meant to have people for conversations, et cetera. It was not meant to crunch the alleys. You know, as the businesses on both sides, if you go down, that have been built in the past few years, it kind of tunnels it. So, this was meant not to tunnel that.
Commissioner Denault?
I also want to get to public comment, so I will keep my question brief. Have you done or do you plan to do any sort of listening sessions with business owners in that area to see how they feel about the project or what sorts of concerns or impacts they're worried about?
Commissioner, we have been to the DDA, okay, a couple of times. We're coming back to the DDA. I have walked around to each of the businesses and tried to introduce myself for 90% of them, okay? I have reached out to different stakeholders, et cetera, and talked to them. I gave them my phone number. My cell phone is on 24/7. In fact, a news reporter called me on my phone today, Diamond Howard got the number, I answered it. I mean, and it's not our intent not to work with the people, not to communicate. That's what we've been trying to do. And I have tried to reach out to some of the main stakeholders and organizations and talk to them in the past 90, 120 days.
All right, at this point, we're going to move on to the public hearing.
Thank you.
We'll be opening the public hearing, just in case anybody came in since the start. So public comment period is limited to 5 minutes per person as the city standard. Obviously, we have a lot of people here tonight. And if you do come up and speak, please fill out your name on the card so we can have your name and address for the minutes. I'm going to start with the cards I have in front of me right now. So first up is Joe Bell.
Hi, my name is Joe Bell. I don't currently have a business in the 500 block, but I did patrol that block for over 42 years, and so I think I kind of have an interest in what happens there. I think you're going to find that perhaps I could get a show of hands, the number of people that are here tonight that would be supporting a strong opposition to this project, and maybe you guys could all, let us know how you feel about that 500 block and the property owners and business owners that are there. I think it's obviously affordable housing is a great idea. I think it's a great idea someplace other than where they want to put it. I believe that you have a letter that I tendered to you folks through Mr. Dempsey, and so you kind of have an idea of what my thoughts are, but mostly I want to keep this as short as I can, and I want you to know that there is a lot of opposition to this for those reasons and for many others. Thanks for hearing me out.
Thank you. Jeff Harand.
Hi, it's Jeff Hurand, H-U-R-A-N-D. I agree with what Joe said. I'm not opposed to apartments or affordable housing or senior housing. I just think that it's important to accommodate the parking. They should have to, in their design, have parking for not only the residents, but not eliminate parking that's very important to all the businesses in that block. And they rely on that parking, especially during peak periods of time. So I don't think it's unreasonable to incorporate that in the design.
Thank you. Graham Larson.
Yeah, my name is Graham Lawson, and I'm going to make this brief because I think it points out a major issue here. During the last few years, we've had an unprecedented resigning of heads of department in East Lansing City Government. We also have a new city council coming up. We have 2 people who are not going to be running, one of which is a mayor, and we have 3 people who are going to be elected amongst many candidates. So we have a lot of changes coming up real soon, within a couple of months. That means 60% of the city council is going to be different. So we have electors that are going to make a decision. And in that decision, they're going to focus on the candidates. And they're going to ask specifically, where do you stand on this issue? And you people here are going to hear arguments from the public, from the candidates. We're going to know where we're going. We're going to know where everybody stands. And issues are going to come up that are not even going to be mentioned here. You will not have this information. So you have a difficult decision. What do you do? What is the right thing to do? Do you not take into account there's going to be an election? Not take into account that there are going to be issues that you're unaware of now? Or are you going to make a recommendation to the City Council that this be put off until we have an election? Let the people's vote count. Thank you.
Hear, hear. Dave Bernath.
Hello, I'm Dave Bernath. I think I have rented and had a business the longest on this 500 block of anybody. I've had the record store for 46 years, flat, black, and circular. And the thought that the parking lot's going to disappear out back scares me, because I have people bringing records. Records are heavy. It's older people, a lot of people moving, and the fact that these records, I'm going to have to go like a block or 2 away. It's going to scare people away. It's not easy. We're upstairs, we're sort of hidden. You won't see us you can't see us anywhere. We can see us out front in Grand River, but I'm all for affordable housing too, but I just hope it doesn't happen behind the store that I've had for 46 years. It's definitely going to impact, and I don't think it's going to be good. And I think that's it.
Thank you. Nathan Werner.
I wanted to thank the commission just for an opportunity to speak. My name's Nathan Werner. I live at the 600 Albert condo apartments. As someone who lives in the Downtown Development Authority's boundaries, my family and I want to express our support for this proposed development. We moved to East Lansing expressly because of the active community that's offered. We encourage the Planning Commission to consider this unique opportunity in front of them, to consider how to diversify and foster positive community population growth in the downtown district. Opportunities for working families and young professionals to live downtown are few and far between. However, student housing is plentiful. If we want to try and obtain a more balance in our community, enabling our downtown businesses to weather the ups and downs of the university calendar, we have to encourage these types of opportunities. This project increases the number of people who live and work in downtown. This project increases tax revenue for the city. This project increases the number of people shopping for goods and services, increases the number of people visiting restaurants and bringing friends and family to visit. As someone who lives directly across the street from the current parking lot in Bailey, I am concerned about the loss of parking spaces. As many have noted, there are multiple existing underutilized parking structures within walking distance. Delaying positive housing change in the downtown area until a perfect parking solution is achieved is not a reasonable path forward. For all these reasons and more, I strongly suggest the Planning Commission endorse the proposed housing project. It's good for East Lansing, and it's the direction the community should go to continue to make progress forward. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a little scribbled. Josh Vermas. That's it.
I get to be next. Okay.
Is that?
So, I have no prepared speech. He's much better at it than I am. Say it again. Oh, Josh Vermas.
Okay, sorry.
So, I'm kind of with the last speaker on this. Like, parking lots are lame. We really need more people to be living downtown, right? So, right across the alley from this particular development is a bike shop that didn't have enough customers and so couldn't afford their rent and had to leave. Right? Like, this is not necessarily just having more people there is going to be better for the community as a whole. And like, if I think about my students and postdocs, they have to live out in Okemos because they can't find anywhere that they can actually afford to live that is anywhere close by, that because they don't have mom and dad writing checks for them. Like, they are professionals doing science, or even the other folks who are working on campus. Like, they either have to commute from God knows where, or they have to go find a job somewhere else, right? Like, if you want East Lansing to continue to grow and have a nucleus of clever young people here, they have to have somewhere to live. And the development seems like just as good a place as any. So that's me. Have fun, guys.
Thank you. Al Bay. Al Bay.
Hi, my name's Al Bay. I have lived in East Lansing here for over 50 years and lived in the 500 block for over 40 years. Seen a lot of changes there. First thing I'd like to do is thank you for the opportunity to speak regarding this issue. I think it's really important that we be included in this decision. To be honest, I really feel, or at least over the past few weeks, I felt as if this cake has already been baked. The mayor sends a letter to Mishta that the city of East Lansing supports this before we've even had a public hearing on this. I look out the window of the bed and breakfast that I own. But I should have mentioned that I own the bed and breakfast right on the west side of this proposed development. They've already been doing drilling for the entire project as far as all, like the samples of the soil and all of this. It's just none of the business owners. 3 weeks ago, most of the business owners, including myself, we didn't know about this. The owner of half of the block, as far as the company that owns, the Phipps company, owns from Sushi-ya all the way down to the vacant spot that used to be Campus Sportswear. Totally unaware of this until about a week and a half ago. So we really need to involve and inform everyone. It's no way for a community to work. Okay, so I guess what I'd like to do is talk about some of the things that I don't like about the project, and then end with what I'm looking for. I'm really surprised that in your discussion for the first 15 minutes of the meeting today, no one asked a question about how this is going to impact the businesses that are currently there. Not a single question that I can remember. Did anyone? Yeah?
We did.
So there was one. There was one. Yeah,
There was a
okay.
couple, yeah.
Sorry, I missed that. But I think it's really, really important that we take that into consideration. Development in this town has really just surprised me in how it has negatively impacted businesses. Mackerel Sky, one of the best gift shops in the country, gone because of the way development occurred around them. Okay, so I've written a letter to you, and I just want you to know that
1 minute time.
okay, so my highest priority, thank you, my highest priority is that whatever happens in downtown East Lansing, that it be accessible to everybody on the main floor. That's the most important thing for me. And what I'm looking for is, we're looking for a downtown development that is something that will provide East Lansing residents and visitors more reasons to come downtown, another place to enjoy a meal, shop, or connect with friends. This proposal does just the opposite. It only makes it more difficult to visit and will result in the decrease in number of visitors to our downtown, absolutely. And it'll result in, basically, I think some of our businesses closing. Thank you.
Ling Brewer?
Good evening. My name is Ling Brewer, and as an individual, as a member of the county legislative body, as a member of the Michigan State Legislature, I've been dealing with the planning department longer than most of you have been alive. And that has been an experience that's been nothing to write home about. I think there's a lure and an allure of big developments by the city of East Lansing and especially the planning department because of the tax dollars that accrue and the lack of commensurate expenses that those large developments have because of the people that live there. Students, this may or may not be a little different. I've been listening to the presentation and I see green space, I see landscaping, but I don't see any appreciation for what the quote-unquote alley is to the community. And to the developers, that alley is just an alley. But for the people that live there, it's more like a thoroughfare. Car counters on streets tally up the amount of traffic that goes by a given street. I don't think anybody has ever tallied the amount of pedestrian traffic that goes up and down that alley to the businesses like the Peanut Barrel, like Sushi Ya, like the Rice Kitchen. And I think you would find that alley traffic comes close to meeting or equaling the traffic on the avenue. The people assembled here are making their feelings known. And this is an opportunity, honored more in the breach, for the planning department to recognize that community impulse and vote no on this project. It's something that has been miserably, in my opinion, has been failed by the department in the past, liking, if not loving, if not embracing large development and dismissing small development. This would be a time for you to pass that test. I hope you will say no to this project.
Dudley Smith. Dudley Smith.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Ed, and everybody else. Thank you for letting us speak tonight. I live in a building that's a version of what this building would be. I live in the Bailey Center. So some of my experiences I'm going to relate to you right now or come from living in that building for the past year or so. I worry about people that may have mobility issues, and I'm wondering if asking people to live in a ramp a block away is really ADA compliant, or where the folks that have a handicap tag on their car or on their license plate would park if they live in this building. I'm wondering if I lived there where I would park to carry my groceries into the building. I'm not going to park in a ramp and carry my groceries a block. Right? And if some people take a couple, 3 trips up into the apartment to get all those Meyer bags up into the apartment, so somebody's going to park someplace for half an hour. I'm going to put the ice cream away before I go move my car after I unload the groceries. I hope you consider these kind of things if, after all this, you decide to go forward considering this plan. The CATA Spectran bus tends to come to these sort of buildings a lot. It's got to sit someplace and wait for the folks to get out and get to the bus. It's not a quick transaction typically. I know the rates are set by HUD, but I pay market rate, the highest you can pay in the Bailey Center, and it's 15% less than the rate at this new building, and I get free parking. I also wonder when HUD calculates the rent rates and the requirements for that, if that's supposed to include parking, or if you're allowed to force people to pay on top of the HUD rates to park their cars. You ought to ask these kind of questions, I hope. And then to get to what Al said, to not have retail or something on the first floor of this building just doesn't seem to fit the character of everything else that we've done in East Lansing for the last 10 or 15, 20 years. The hub's got it on the first floor. All the new big buildings downtown, they all have accessible retail kind of stuff on the first floor that makes it a lot more attractive, I think. And then the other thing, if there are credits available for having gone 100% low income on this building, perhaps we ought to talk about applying those first to the buildings that have already been built that did not meet that requirement, failed to do their 15% or whatever the requirement is, because I've heard several of them have failed to meet that, and back apply it rather than have other buildings that don't meet the requirement and use these credits for that. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Sally Potter?
Sally Potter, thanks for the possibility of speaking tonight. I've owned several small businesses. I've owned a used sporting goods store for 15 years, and that store would not have worked at all without parking right up to the front door. People get their stuff, put it in. That's what I get to do with FBC's records. I'm the general manager right now of the East Side Lansing Food Co-op. I did not sign the contract to be the general manager until the Allen Place made the parking in front of the Allen Place on the 1600 block of East Kalamazoo be 2-hour parking. Tenants could not park there. Parking is everything. Mr. Dempsey went through his list and he compared, a place to park in the ramps. There are 4 rules to retail in the Midwest. Again, I've owned 2 businesses, and now I'm running a co-op. Another business in Old Town. Same thing, parking. Surface parking is everything to small business. The punchline is going to be in 3 minutes. If you pass this, all 15 small businesses in the 500 block are done. And then they're going to, but the landlords will be okay because they'll get some national franchisee to take those slots. But the impulse to go to East Lansing is barely there for someone who used to work there, who now lives in Lansing, who comes over to the Barrel, or to Flat Black, or to Campbell's, or to the burrito place, right? If there is no easy way to get in and out, I'm not talking about the ramps, I'm talking about getting in, paying $4 for parking, seeing friends and going, or checking out the recordings. These businesses are done. All right, there are 4 retail rules. 1, they like to park where they can see the door to where they enter. These are real retail rules. Let's go to the Barrel afterwards. I'll tell you where they're from. 2, they like to see, 1, they want to see the door they're going to. Otherwise, they won't go. Seriously. They hate parking ramps. There is a reason why these ramps turn out full. It is not because there are not smart people in this community. They hate parking ramps. We grew up where they do. They're unsafe for women and all that, but they hate it. We all grew up on the plains. My dad said you could tell you were a Midwesterner if you could see the sun rise and see the sun fall without moving your feet. And we are not using parking ramps. We want to park, we want to go in. It's not modern, it's not cool, but it's reality. And that's the reality that these businesses have to face. The other 2 are they hate double doors and they hate stores on the 2nd floor. That's 2 too. Those 4 are dead on retail in the Midwest, and I'm running my 3rd store right now, and they're all true. So, the perception is it's hard to park in East Lansing. This is the only place, if you can swallow $4 in parking for 2 hours, that makes it possible. But when you get rid of that ramp, you're done. The 500 block is done, and you're going to get stupid franchisees who don't understand that the 500 block is done. The last thing I'll say is when I taught personal finance to high school kids in Waverly, we would say, just say no. But it wasn't, Reagan's wife saying that about drugs. It was walking away from car deals. I got it. It was walking away from car deals. It was walking away from the rent-a-center because we did the interest rates by hand. It was walking away. If Mr. whoever it is who owns this, I think I know, but I'm not going to get on record, if they can't do what they want to with this lot, because it's a lousy idea. It is a horrendous idea. How the hell would you get 80 people out here on a Wednesday night with little to no notice if it weren't such a bad idea? Okay, if they can't do what they want to do with that lot, who cares? They'll figure something out. Or they'll say, maybe I shouldn't have bought that piece of property. Or they'll say, okay, well, let it sit there. And then the city will go, and they'll say, you want to do it for parking? It is not your problem to figure out what they need to do with their land.
Thank you. John Carr.
Hello, John Carr, C-A-R-R. I also live at the 600 Albert Avenue building right across the street from the proposed project. I have a bit of a different concern. As ACD mentioned, they own over 100 properties in 11 different states, and one of the properties that they own is called the Himmelhoch Building in downtown Detroit. Once that building was completed and filled with residents, they raised the rent to the point where a lot of the residents could no longer afford it. And then ACD's solution was to transfer those residents to Brush Park, which was a much less desirable place to live. And if they wouldn't transfer, they were homeless. So my concern is if the same thing happens in East Lansing and we move a bunch of people in there and they raise the rent, now we have a homeless problem right downtown. And I have the Detroit City Council minutes that document all of this that occurred at the Himmelhoch building. So I don't know if ACD would like to comment on that, but that's my concern. I don't want to bring, we need low-income housing, but I don't want to bring all these people in, and now the rate's so high that we have homeless problem right downtown. And this is not a low-rent district. This is a high-rent district. I pay a lot in taxes for my condo, so bringing low-rent people in here, I think we're bringing them in and they're going to get cooked. They're going to raise the rent. People want to live downtown. And, these apartments are going to go like that. And as soon as they're full, this is what happens. Humans are greedy. The apartment complex is going to fill up overnight. They're going to jack up the rent, and then we're going to have a homeless problem. I don't know if you want the Detroit City Council minutes, but they had to address this at the Himmelhoch property, so I think you should look at it. Thank you.
Jeffrey Hank.
Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Jeffrey Hank. I'm an East Lansing resident. I live about 2 blocks from this proposed development, but I'm here tonight in professional capacity as legal counsel for Citizens to Protect East Lansing Access. And many of the people here in this room, the various businesses and property owners and residents in the neighborhood who are completely opposed to this project. And I will start out by saying I appreciated what Mr. Young had to say and that he was treated well. He seems like a nice guy. And what you're hearing from everybody is a lot of people, we all support affordable housing. But at this property, this design, absolutely not. We are all concerned about losing the gems that are this East Lansing downtown culture, these businesses, places that have been here. I remember as a kid, it was cool. I grew up in Holt. It was cool to come downtown East Lansing. Things have changed. It's not as cool, and I live downtown. But I remember going to Flatback and Circular and other places. And if we lose those places and we lose the jobs and we lose the economic livelihood, that's a huge problem. There are so many issues with this particular development that have been raised. I sent you a letter today, and you're hearing a lot of them here tonight. But parking, obviously a big one. The concern of the lack of the cultural space, the open space. This is the last potential development area in this area of downtown other than the mess we've got over on the other side of town, which was also created by poor city planning. We don't want to have that happen again. Hearing that the city, and blame whoever you want, but hearing that there wasn't some foresight to think about what's going to happen with this lot. Where was the plan 1, 2, 3, 4 years ago? And it's private property, so someone else said they could do what they want with it. But we should have been thinking about all that. So that's mostly going to be my message to you here tonight, is to stop, think, be thoughtful, be deliberate, be inclusive. I think we're going to lose 6 handicap parking spots in that lot. Where do those people go when they want to visit whatever business down there they want to go to? I keep hearing about diversity, equity, inclusion. That's not inclusive, and that's not equitable, and that doesn't provide diversity, doesn't provide access, for sure. A lot of the most unique businesses in East Lansing are right on that block. I mean, Al Bay and FBC and Peanut Barrel, those are places people remember from 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, and if we start losing that stuff, then what's the point of this? I also appreciate that alleyway. I have a young child. I walk down there all the time. I don't like walking down the other alleyways. I was almost assaulted in the one behind Target. It's not safe. It doesn't feel safe. You walk down there at night. I encourage all you to walk from Grand River all the way down to Bailey or Collingwood. That's the nicest stretch. It is very pedestrian. The design that I saw online does get rid of the benches. Maybe that's going to change. But there needs to be a lot that would change with this proposal. So as others mentioned, there's an election coming up. This is going to be an issue. I've never seen this many people at a planning commission meeting, maybe since the city center 2 days, which I bring up because that sort of lack of due diligence, planning, thoughtfulness, lack of deliberation caused 10+ years of blight. It caused mistrust, distrust in the community, financial problems, taxpayers bailing stuff out. We don't want that to happen again. This may not be of that magnitude, but the alarm that's been caused to bring all these people out here on a beautiful summer night came about in part because people feel not informed, and maybe people do feel lack of trust, and that has nothing to do with any of you. I mean, you are all very nice people. A lot of people know you're all community residents, as are many of the people here, and we're concerned about this. So I'd like you to just listen to everyone here tonight. This is the start of this process, but it should go very slow if this is to go forward at all. And losing that open spot, jazz festival, art festival, folk festivals, whether it's kids Halloween events, whatever it might be, this would be our last chance to design something very thoughtful in that area. Open cafe spaces like that. I mean, people love the Albert al fresco, but you're shutting the street down to do that. So we should be really thoughtful about how we're going to do anything there, and don't damage the existing people who are there and who make up this town. And someone brought up Mackerel Sky. I just read about Blue Owl Coffee Shop is closing down, and they cited parking too. So whether there's a perception or truth to the lack of parking and accessibility in downtown, people believe there is, and people are frustrated by it. So when you're thinking this through, try to listen and incorporate all the concerns here if this is to go forward at all. But I think the consensus that you're hearing tonight and that you're going to continue to hear is that this shouldn't happen. And maybe that doesn't mean that something never happens there, but there needs to be a different plan for this. So I thank you for your time.
Paul Martin.
Hi, everyone. I'm Paul Martin. Thank you for letting me speak here tonight. I have been managing the Wild Goose Inn Bed and Breakfast for almost 15 years now, and we're located directly west of this proposed development. And when we learned about this project, I personally went around and visited over 20 of the businesses on the 500 block, and not one was in favor of this proposed development. This development makes it more difficult to visit downtown near any business on the 500 block, and in turn, it'll significantly hurt every local business. I also personally visited private homes in the Bailey neighborhood in the last few days just to inform about this development, and I'd say more than half of them didn't know about it either. To sum it up, I just don't think our community is ready for this current proposal, and I agree with Jeff that I would appreciate it if you guys thought about this before you make any decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's all the cards I have, unless I missed any. Okay, yeah, please come forward. Thank you. Is it? Chris LaChance.
Chris LaChance. I am the owner of Splash of Color Tattoo and Piercing Studio. I've been in downtown East Lansing since 1994. Pushing 30 years next year. I am at 515 East Grand River on the second floor. I have a large clientele that utilizes those, the handicap parking and the elevator to get them up. As a small, independently owned business, it is very challenging to still be here and be relevant. We pull a lot of people from outside of downtown East Lansing. I would say maybe 30 to 40% of our business is student-related, but we've been around over, many, many decades. We're generational now. We're a destination business. People come from out of the area with purpose. Owning a business in the city of East Lansing for that many years, I have never had a free day of parking unless it's a Sunday. I pay for parking. I have 15 employees that pay for parking. I could have put my kid through state with what I paid for parking, but having that lot behind me as a female business owner, that my bank is no longer downstairs, it's 3 blocks away, carrying cash, having to go up, parking in a ramp, solo. There's security concerns for me, but my biggest concern is from my clientele. It is seen, you would think that East Lansing is Timbuktu from the south side of Lansing. To go drive to East Lansing, pay to park, walk around the block if you have to enter, unless you're coming up the disabled way. It's not exactly user-friendly now, and it's gonna be a lot less user-friendly then. If this happens. I did not know anything about this until I was walking out of work about a month ago and ran into Al, who was talking to the developer outside. No clue. So this is kind of all coming out of nowhere. I love East Lansing. Again, I pay more property tax than most homeowners on a building I don't own. I'm choosing to be here with an outrageous overhead because of the diversity of the community. And I feel that my business is an asset to this community because not only do we cater to the students, but we pull a lot of people in from everywhere, all over the state and out of state as well, generationally. I want what's best for our city, and I want to see the mom and pops continue. There's a very small handful of businesses that have survived even 5 years out here. Look at the vacancies now in my own building. Half of it was vacant for the last 3 to 5 years. A huge portion of it is vacant, and a lot of that is because my employees trying to get new qualified, capable humans to come work for me. Here's what I can pay you, but you have to buy a parking pass for $120 a month and, park up in the ramp. Or you're gonna pay $20 a day to park behind us. It's all of that figures into recruitment of workers that have to pay for parking, people that want to open businesses that have to pay for parking and pay property taxes when they're renting. And, just making it more accessible again for everyone. Affordable housing, yes, we need it everywhere. I just don't think that that's the ideal spot to do it. And I want to stay in East Lansing. I want to be there. I signed another 5-year lease because I have that accessibility. I can park right behind my business and carry all my loads of everything I need to carry without having to do that, walking a block away. So definitely if you could give that some more consideration for the businesses that have contributed and helped build this community and help bring people into this community that aren't just students, it'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am?
My name is Linda Dufelmeyer, and I just found out about this yesterday. And my husband and I are the people who owned Mackerel Sky. And in a similar circumstance, the area that we had our store became totally inhospitable to having a business, and that's what's going to happen to the 500 block. And interestingly, listening to Al talk about the lack of transparency and finding out about this project came when he saw core samples being drilled in the parking lot behind him and gave him pause to wonder why they were doing that. That's exactly what happened with the city center project. It had never been announced. There was nothing that we knew about, and we listened to everything. In fact, I was on the planning commission in the 90s. All of a sudden, there's these engineers out back in Lot 1 drilling for core samples. And it was kind of like, well, what the fuck, you know? So we started asking around, and oh yeah, there's a development that might be occurring. And so that's how we found out about the city center thing. And that was rammed down our throats. No matter, I mean, totally reasonable people who would come to city council meetings and explain why this was not a good idea. Well, it was one of the most beloved open spaces where people gathered. You could walk everywhere in the city. You could see everything. I can't even walk down that alley because it's so hideous. And I don't even like coming into East Lansing anymore since we closed our business. We were in East Lansing for 30 years. And just at the point where we would need to sign another 10-year lease, we just decided that's it. You know, we don't want to do this anymore. Well, that's what's going to happen to the parking lot behind the Peanut Barrel. It's open and it's a community space, and that's where we have events, right? That's what happened with Lot 1. Now, in order to have a community space, because that building and parking ramp is there, you have to close down Albert Street and give people some place to gather. I mean, it's the whole process. East Lansing's insane because the quality of life for the people who live here and pay taxes never seems to be in consideration when decisions are made about what's going to be done to properties, especially in the downtown. I talk to people who used to frequent our store who say they never come to downtown anymore because what's there to come for except to the Peanut Barrel, see you on Friday, you know, and to Flat Black and Circular, you know, and it's the businesses that are in the 500 block that are the ones that draw people into East Lansing now. I think it's really important for you to listen to these people's points of view. And I think it's the Metzger family that owns the parking lot. And I can understand the people who own that property wanting to unload it. And perhaps the city should consider purchasing it and doing something with it that would benefit the community instead of having a developer come in. So we can buy lottery tickets, or we can, you know, listen to the people. This is a really bad idea, and I think that it's, you know, it's putting the cart before the horse.
Thank you.
I'll fill out a speaker card. I just couldn't get to them because they're here at the podium. My name is Lynn Rulaine Stokes. I've lived in this area in East Lansing and Lansing for over 50 years. Sometimes I've lived in East Lansing, sometimes I've lived in Lansing. And East Lansing has always been my downtown. I mean, I just knew it inside out. I used to spend a fair amount, a good deal of money at shops and restaurants, bars in East Lansing. I used to buy clothes there. I used to do all sorts of things. I almost never come to East Lansing anymore. And it's really because the stores and the restaurants that I loved have closed, and because parking is a hassle. You know, I'm not afraid of ramps. I understand the whole thing about theoretically making cities denser, and theoretically that bringing more people in. But I think development has to fit the community and the businesses where it's made. I mean, it has to work for people. And what I think so many people tonight are trying to tell you is the development in East Lansing is not working for us. It really is not working for us. It seems a tragedy to me. It was the place I loved. It was the place I felt at home. It is a tragedy, but it's a tragedy of not understanding that everything we do, everything we build has to fit the nature of the community, has to fit the businesses, has to serve people's human interests, or people just won't come. Thank you very much. I'll fill out my card.
Thank you.
I'm Jim Secor. I have lived on Butterfield for probably 15 years now, and I try to keep myself reasonably well informed, but this one caught me totally off guard. We went from knowing nothing about it until we're about to break ground. We're taking core samples, and the part that alarms me is the rush. This is a big decision. This is going to have impact for generations to come, and it comes as a surprise to most of us. No one knew anything about this. And further, our city council is in disarray. We've got all kinds of turnover coming up. I think this whole matter should be tabled. Give us time to think about it.
My name is Lily Leventhal, and I don't live in the area, and I hardly shop, but I live in East Lansing since 1991, and I see the changes in the city. The lack of transparency from the city council, city leadership is really alarming. We don't have a newspaper that's telling us what's going on. So we hear it here and there, bits and pieces, last minute, and this is not the way to run a city. So I speak generally about, I'm not happy with the leadership of our city right now. About this specific issue of affordable housing, I'm for it. And there is lots of space in northern of Lake Lansing Road. There is a spacious, we don't have to cramp 300 people, or I don't know how many people are going to live in these 122 units. Maybe 250, I'm not sure, like how many people are we putting in this crammy, very small lot. Is it 300?
132 is proposed.
132, but they have a girlfriend maybe? So it will be 300? Before we know it, it's going to be 300 people in a very small place trying to live a life. Plus, it's not affordable because you said $30,000 a year or $40,000. I'm hearing like $1,000 rent a month, meaning $12,000 plus parking that they need to pay. It's not going to be affordable. We know that. So I don't know exactly what is the solution. I think we should stop, like other people suggested, and consider other places that are more spacious, more quality of living for the people that are low income and want to live in our city. Thank you so much.
Does anybody else wish to come forward? Do we have anyone in the queue?
We do not have anyone waiting in the queue.
All right, thank you. At this point, we will close the public hearing, and we're not taking action on this item tonight. We will see it potentially on the next Planning Commission agenda, which I think is August 23rd, right? Thereabouts.
Yes, 2 weeks from this evening.
All right.
May I?
Vice Chair?
Just, there were several things that you noted in the staff report that were missing from the submittal that I would expect we would see in 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's correct.
There's a photometric plan and
Yes.
light and landscaping, and just there was a fair number of them, and I would expect.
Yeah, that is correct.
Thanks.
Yep. As well as responses to a number of the questions that we heard here tonight.
It'll be on the agenda. It won't be considered a public hearing unless at some point they put forward a new proposal, and then that might trigger a public hearing. We don't know yet at this point. Yeah.
They would still be able to comment just now.
But you could still comment during the public comment period at the beginning of the commission meeting. It just wouldn't be considered a public hearing.
Sorry, most written stuff that we can into.
Yeah. And if you want to send us letters, that's okay too.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. It's a long night. All right, that brings us on to item number 8, new business. I don't believe we have any. Item number 9, commissioner concerns. I'll just say first off, I didn't know that there was going to be this much math tonight, so dealing with percentages and fractions, and my mind's spinning a little bit. But Commissioner Lapine?
I guess I have just truly a question,
Yeah.
maybe for Tim. I mean, we do seem to be having, our last meeting, we had something that was new for us, I think collectively, with the lumber proposal, the mass-produced lumber. This is certainly new. I am concerned about the lack of staff in the planning department in general to prepare at this current, at this current cadence. Like, do we need to think about pushing out our meetings a little bit? Is it fair to turn around the things that we are asking of you, basically only you, before the next 2 weeks? I just don't know what really our process should or could be, given the shortage of staff in the department.
Yeah. So there's a couple things to that. One is that, we've been utilizing a consultant, Lene Wells of Aligned Planning, who's been doing a lot of the preliminary staff report work on these. There's obviously a number of questions here that we're going to take and divide up. Like, for instance, the date of origin of the parking lot. We'll have our parking division research that. So we do spread that out. I think in some respects it potentially could be a valid concern. But I think right now, it's sort of the larger question to me is one of just some of the issues that were raised and how the Planning Commission might want to think about tackling that. And, we'll have to have a follow-up conversation with the developer. What is going to be their response to what they heard tonight? And maybe they're going to want to alter the process.
Okay.
So I think your concern is very valid and something we're definitely going to want to think about.
Is that yours? Oh, someone gave it
And
to me.
we do appreciate the recognition that we are short-staffed.
And it's
So
truly
thank
not
you.
coming from a bad place. If it's
and
just
I-
you, it's a quick turnaround.
It's not taken that way. It's
Okay.
actually, I'm grateful for that, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
And traditionally, projects of this scale haven't really followed the 2-meeting
Yeah.
process that's generally followed for the smaller proposals.
Yeah.
There's generally more back and forth and potentially, not necessarily saying this will happen, but a new site plan
Right.
based on feedback that we're providing or.
Right.
But yeah, so next meeting really will be more about discussion about the specifics amongst ourselves and potential ideas we have about the project or things we like or don't like about the project. Any other commissioner concerns? All right, seeing none, I believe a motion to adjourn is in order.
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Vice Chair Bowman, seconded by Commissioner Denault, I think. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it, motion carries. We are adjourned at 9:05 PM.